I walk through city parks all the time. I've lived in a major city for a long time, and I walk almost about all over. Numerous times it's at night, since I work truly abnormal hours. A few of a long time back, I was on my way domestic. I had fair picked up a few nourishment to eat at a eatery that was around a 10-minute walk from my loft. It was night time and dim out. Things were reasonably calm on the sidewalks. There was still a decent sum of other individuals that were out, but I'd chosen to acquire an easy route through one of the parks that was nearby. Parks were nearly continuously much calmer when it was dim out. I was intending to be walking on a way that went right through it. There were numerous trees, a small woods along one side, and some areas of open grass, seats, and tables. I would have possibly 5 minutes of a walk through this range, and this night in specific, almost a diminutive into the stop, things were exceptionally calm. I was the as it were individual around, but before long I listened to clamour. There was an extent of thick woods to my cleared out, and it sounded like a huge creature was fair interior of it. I thought it was an animal sense of the commotion being within the thick woods, but it may have been an individual as well, I assume. It sounded like they moved many feet into the woods, and after that more profound in, and got a small bit behind me. I looked over and saw a few clears out and branches moving, but didn't see who or what had made the commotion at all. I kept walking, and I pondered what it had been. It was fair abnormal for a huge creature to be in this section of the woods, in spite of the fact that I figure it was conceivable. I thought that possibly it may be a person, but that appeared lovely interesting as well. I strolled in courage along the way. I would say approximately 2 minutes after that. I at that point listened strides behind me. They were a ways back, perhaps nearly 100 feet, but I may listen them. The more I strolled, in spite of the fact that the more the strides appeared to be getting closer to me. It got to be a genuine concern when whoever was behind me sounded like they were presently as it were almost 50 feet back. I'd been strolling at a beautiful normal speed, but certainly not moderate. I quickly looked behind me to see who was there. I couldn't see all that well since of being in a stop at night time. I may tell that it showed up to be a man though. He was wearing a coat with the hood up, and he was looking down, so I couldn't see his confront at all. This didn't make me feel any way better. In reality, I was more stressed presently. I strolled a little bit quicker. He kept on pick up on me, in spite of the fact that I as it were had around another miniature of strolling through this stop. Sometime recently, I would be back in typical city sidewalks. I fair needed to form it out of that stop, since I knew when I would there would be other individuals strolling around. The man kept getting closer and closer. By the time I could see the conclusion of the stop, he was as it were like 15 feet behind me. He began to speed up more, and I made a run for it when I was closer to the walkway. I made it, and I observed the man go out of sea behind a few trees within the stop as I walked out onto the walkway. Quickly, I saw several other individuals strolling down it as well. I felt right away way better, and the man was still inside the stop. I didn't know what he had been attempting to do, but I was fair upbeat to be absent from him. I proceeded strolling back to my loft, which was presently as it were many squares absent. After walking on the walkway for a brief time, I turned to another road. I was truly near to my loft presently, but this road was much calmer. I walked on that walkway for maybe a miniature, and with my building in locate, and not beyond any doubt why, but I'd chosen to see behind me. I hadn't heard anything, but for anything reason, I fair chosen to see back. I truly was not anticipating to see the man there once more, but he was there. He was a long ways behind me, likely like 100 feet once more. I couldn't accept it. I turned and actually began sprinting for my building. When I had made it to the entryways, I looked back. The man was strolling towards me, approximately 30 feet away. I rapidly utilized my key dandy to get interior of my flat building and made sure that the entryway closed behind me. I didn't hold up to see in the event that the man would attempt to come interior. I went straight over to the lift and went up to my floor. Before long, I got interior my loft. I was truly creeped out and couldn't accept that I'd seen that man once more. I went over to my window and looked out to see on the off chance that the guy was still out there on the road. Sure enough, he was. I saw him strolling absent down the walkway. Tragically, I didn't realize how obvious I was being. I wasn't ducking down or anything behind the window shades. I was fair standing there looking exterior as the man was strolling absent. He happened to see up and appeared to see at me. I rapidly closed the shades and moved. Away from the window, I looked out of it once more around an hour afterward. Unfortunately, the man was gone and out of locate at that point. I do not know what his eagerly were, but I'm truly happy he didn't get into my building. This can be an unusual thing that happened to me not as well long ago. I was out for a walk one night attempting to get my steps in. I have a wellness tracker and I attempt to walk at slightest 10,000 steps per day. Now and then I'm able to urge that sum early on depending on what I'm doing. Other times I'm constrained to go strolling at night or something like that. I typically get there beautiful effortlessly, and it's as it were here and there that I'm cleared out attempting to get them later. This story takes place on one of the days where I didn't have that numerous steps in spite of the fact that it was night time, likely 9 o'clock, and I as it were had almost 5,000 steps. The climate happened to be truly pleasant out, and I'd chosen that I would go for a walk exterior to induce my steps in. To begin with, I was a small uncertain of strolling at night, but at that point I thought why not, and I'd chosen to fair go for it. The house is in a beautiful ordinary neighbourhood. It's a calm road with a bunch of houses on it. There's also many other streets similar to mine, and it's an exceptionally expansive neighbourhood by and large. I left my house and started strolling down the driveway onto my street. It was a calm night for the most portion. Clearly no one else was out strolling or anything like that at this hour. I strolled to the conclusion of my road, and after that went down to the following one over. I didn't truly have a range on precisely where I was strolling to. The as it were range I truly had was to fair walk down adjacent roads until I come to maybe 8,000 steps or so, and after that I would head back. By the time I got domestic, I would either be at 10,000 steps or exceptionally near to it. I was strolling down the another road over from mine when I take a note a car turning onto it. I didn't think anything of it. I moved near to the side of the road as there were no sidewalks to walk on. The car drawn closer, but it was travelling greatly moderate. It had to be going less than 10 miles per hour. This did appear kind of unusual and raised a small bit of concern, but not an entire parcel. I was strolling within the heading of the car, and it was driving towards me. It took a whereas, but before long the car passed me by. I didn't bother to see over and see who was driving or anything like that. The car drove past me and then turned onto the following road. I kept strolling. Inevitably, I made it to the conclusion of the road that I was strolling on and went to the following one over. I made it nearly completely down that road sometime recently, seeing the same car again. It was still driving gradually, but a small speedier than some time recently. This time it was driving within the same heading that I was going. It came up from behind me and passed me by. I didn't see over this time either. I strolled down one more road and I come to my 8,000 steps. At that point, I'd chosen to turn around and head back to my house. But when I was strolling back, I couldn't accept it. But I saw the same car once more. This time it was odd, since the headlights were off. The car was driving within the same direction that I was strolling once more, and was moving greatly moderate behind me. I was holding up for the car to pass me, but it didn't. After a whereas, I looked behind me. The car was apparently taking after me, driving at almost the same speed that I was walking at. It wasn't right behind me, but a small ways back. I was getting truly suspicious presently. When I got to the conclusion of the road, I turned to the another one. My road was just one more over from that. The car, of course, taken after me. I didn't know what to do. When I got a small ways down that road with the car still taking after me, I halted, turned around and looked at it. The car ceased as well. I kept standing there, and the car was sitting there a ways absent. Not one or the other of us were moving. I still couldn't see who was driving the car, between it being dull out and the car being kind of distant absent. I fair couldn't see. At that point, the car began backing up. It went in invert for a brief remove sometime, recently halting and turning around totally. At that point, the car drove off. I didn't squander any time and started strolling rapidly back to my house. I was anticipating at any minute for the car to drive down the road another time, but it didn't. I didn't know what their bargain was, but I fair needed to get back domestic. After strolling rapidly down the road for a whereas, I really begun running. I don't like to run, but I felt that it was vital. I made it domestic much quicker than in the event that I had strolled, and once I was inside I felt much way better. I considered it for a whereas, pondering who was in that car, and what precisely they were doing. The story doesn't conclusion there, in spite of the fact that not very. Possibly an hour after I'd returned domestic, I was casually strolling into my living room when I looked out the window. I take a note that there was a car sitting within the carport. The lights were off, and I recognized it as the same car promptly. I got the creeps. Why were they at my house, and how on soil did they know where I lived? The car was fair sitting there within the garage. I couldn't tell in the event that anyone was interior of it or not. I trusted that they weren't slinking around the house or something like that. After standing by the window and observing for a whereas, I strolled over to the front door. I'd chosen to turn on the light to the exterior zone before the driveway. After turning it on almost 10 seconds afterward, I listened the motor to the car begin. The car at that point sponsored up with the lights still off, and after that cleared out my carport and sped absent. I was happy that it was gone, but dreaded that it would come back once more. I checked the window a few more times that night, but the car never returned. Ever since that night, I haven't seen the car once more, which I'm cheerful to say. I still wonder almost it in spite of the fact that, and have a parcel of questions. Who was driving the car, and why were they taking after me? How did they know where I lived, and why were they stopped in my driveway? I do not have any of these answers, but I'm just happy that I'm all right. I live in a calm neighborhood. One thing that I like to do is go for strolls at whatever point I get the chance. Ordinarily, I walk down to the conclusion of my road, and either walk down an adjacent road or walk through a nearby stop. I go apart at night since I work amid the day, and when I get domestic, I'm continuously as well hungry and tired to go strolling right absent. Strolling at night has never bothered me. Beyond any doubt, it might appear a small spooky at times, but the neighborhood that I live in has continuously appeared exceptionally secure to me. There's not a parcel of houses on the road, and it once in a while gets any cars. There too aren't any active roads within the quick range. Numerous individuals walk their mutts amid the day, but at night it's more often than not fair me strolling. I know most of my neighbours. I even know a couple of individuals from adjacent boulevards. Everyone is continuously truly decent. So this story took place likely a month or two prior. After getting domestic from work, I had a few nourishment and loose for a bit. At that point, I got the tingle to go for a walk. I wouldn't walk each single day, but likely like 3 or 4 evenings a week on normal, depending on the climate. I cleared out my house to begin strolling that night. It was likely 8 p.m. I strolled down my garage, which is beautiful long. My yard is almost 2 sections of land, and most individuals within the zone have its slightest and section of landed property. It's kind of a wild region, and there's moreover a little woods in my patio. I walked to the conclusion of my road, which kind of controls, and after that was attending to walk down another road and through the adjacent park. When I come to the conclusion of my road, and it fair turned onto another, I saw a man strolling. He was entering my road, and I only looked at this man for around 2 or 3 seconds. He wasn't looking at me, but I didn't recognize him. He showed up as in spite of the fact that he was beginning to walk down my road, and I kind of pondered who he was and what he was doing. It was fair truly abnormal for someone to walk down the road at this time, but at that point once more, that's what I was doing. What was more abnormal is that I didn't recognize him as living within the zone, so why would he be strolling down my road? The man was wearing a baseball cap sort of cap and had a sweatshirt on. He did not see at me at all, and I was as of now headed within the other heading when he came and chosen. After that I kept strolling. I made it to the stop a few minutes afterward. I was reaching to walk around there for a whereas. It was ordinarily beautiful curiously to walk through it. I finished up strolling around the stop area for likely 30 minutes or so. It was calm, and I was the as it were one there the entire time. The as it were sounds I listened were intermittent squirrels running through the park and crickets off within the separate. After that, I headed back to my road. I strolled the remove back all the way to my house. It took possibly 15 minutes add up to urge back to my house from the stop. But as I was on my road strolling and drawing nearer my house, I listened something. I was perhaps 40 feet absent from my carport and might see into my front yard. The sound was coming from my front yard, and it sounded like perhaps a creature was running through my yard. I listened a bush moving close the front of my house. It wasn't exceptionally boisterous, but I listened its sense of how quiet it was outside. When I looked into the course of the sound to begin with, I listened nothing. There were a few trees and bushes scattered around in my front yard. I halted strolling and stood where I was looking. The commotion had sounded like a bigger creature, but I didn't see anything. I took 1 or 2 of steps forward to induce distant better. A much better, a higher, a stronger, an improved greater than a much better see. When I did, I saw something move. I kept looking, and in spite of the fact that it was dim out, I finally saw it. There showed up to be a man sort of covering up behind my bush. I take a note that it looked just like the same man that I had seen strolling down my road prior. Presently this was a small bazaar. I was sort of concerned. Why would a few fellow be stowing away in my front yard? I gradually took some steps closer to my driveway. I wasn't sure what I was intending to do. I might attempt to walk up the garage into my house, or I seemed choose not to. I was truly stressed what the man was attempting to do in spite of the fact that, and I rapidly chosen that I was not aiming to walk up to my front entryway. I kept walking past my garage down the road. When I made it out of the man's locate, I chosen that I needed to induce into my house. I couldn't just walk around all night. I chosen that I was getting to attempt to urge interior, and I kept strolling further down my road. At that point, I entered the yard of one of my neighbours. many entryways down from me. I strolled past their house and into their terrace. There was a lush region that traversed the separate of a few of our backyards, counting mine. I made it to the woods in my neighbour's terrace, and after that entered it as discreetly as I may. I strolled through the woods within the course of my patio. The woods was not as well thick, so I was able to walk through it lovely effortlessly and not make as well much noise. It was very dull out, but I knew that I was moving within the right heading. It took me around 5 minutes, but eventually I had presently made it into my claimed patio. I walked over to the edge of my woods. My house was less than 100 yards absent. I got my house keys prepared, and after that began sprinting to my back entryway. I would be able to unlock that and get interior, ideally without the man knowing. I was lovely beyond any doubt he was still in my front yard. The mistake I made, though, was that I ran. I wanted to get there rapidly, but looking back, I ought to have fared gradually and discreetly walked through my yard. Running unquestionably made a part more climber. When I made it a small more than halfway there, I listened a commotion coming from around the front of my house. I may listen that somebody was presently strolling around and headed towards where I was. I kept running and at long last made it to the back entryway. I still had to open it in spite of the fact that. As I stood at the back entryway and mixed to urge the key in, I looked over. I saw the same man strolling around from the side of my house. When he saw me, he changed from a walk to a run. I was able to induce the entryway opened, and I opened it. At that point, I hammered it closed as quick as I may behind me and bolted it. Almost a moment or two after the entryway was bolted, the man come to it and attempted opening it. I looked out the window, and after he realized that the entryway was bolted, he turned and ran absent. I went to the front of my house and looked exterior to create beyond any doubt that the man was clearing out. Beyond any doubt sufficient, he ran back down my carport and into the road. After that, he strolled out of locate. I'd chosen that I would call the police on him indeed, in spite of the fact that he had giggled. I didn't think much can be done, but I'm happy that I still detailed him. I haven't seen the fellow since at that point. The total circumstance was truly shocking to me, since I never thought something like that would happen in my neighbourhood. I still go for strolls, but I'm truly cautious.